Arizona's presidential preference primary.
We weren't expecting to see lines that were upward of 5 or 6 hours. Some were reporting being in line still at midnight. That was one of the bigger surprises to come out of Tuesday.
How Tuesday's results fare in the political landscape.
It's still over 7 months until we go to the ballot, until we get a ballot, we go to the polls. That's an eternity in politics. So many things could happen, so many outside influences could happen.
Plus independent voters in the state. This is Arizona Week. Hello and thanks for joining us. Arizona voters turned out to the polls Tuesday for the presidential preference primary. The results, as polls predicted, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, the clear winners. Days before the primary, the candidates saturated Arizona, hosting rallies throughout the state. The political visits began Friday afternoon in Douglas along the U.S.-Mexico border. Texas Senator Ted Cruz toured the international line, claiming the border is not secure.
Where we toured the border, the fencing was minimal. Indeed, as we stopped and stood on the border, several of the folks here in the media taking pictures decided they'd get a better picture from the other side of the fence, so they promptly climbed the fence and crossed illegally into the nation of Mexico. Took all of 10 seconds to climb the fence and get a better shot from another nation. I'm not sure if the Mexican authorities will be arresting any of our members of the media. But it says something that this was not a complicated endeavor. This was just, oh, the camera shot's a little better from over in Mexico, let's cross over. Well, you know, if you're a drug coyote, if you're bringing hundreds of pounds of heroin or cocaine or marijuana, and I would note the drug epidemic we have in this country is devastating. Over 50,000 people dying in a typical year from drug overdoses. Heroin is destroying the lives of our young people, and that unsecured border is a big part of the reason when it's so easy that you can hop the fence. My 5-year-old daughter could have climbed over or under that fence in about 20 seconds.
A private event at the home of longtime rancher Warner Glenn. These ranchers telling the Republican what they think will work.
General opinion here was more surveillance, either mechanical or aerial or whatever on the border itself, and then have quick response teams to go when there's an illegal entry of some kind, to have those teams ready to go catch them, whether they're drug guys or whether they're just people looking for work, and go ahead and shut this traffic down right on the border if it's possible. That's the best thing scenario if we could get that done.
Cruz spent most of Friday in Douglas and Phoenix. 25% of Arizona voters supported him in Tuesday's primary. And 4 days in Arizona was not enough for Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. The Democrat rallied thousands inside the Tucson Convention Center Friday night. At 74, the oldest candidate in the presidential race, polls show he's especially popular with younger voters.
As a recent graduate with over $40,000 in debt, and that's with the GI Bill, I know all too personal the burden of a college debt. Senator Sanders believes that every person has a right of a free education, and he wants Wall Street to pay for it.
Supporters listened to his stance on everything from immigration to health care and the environment.
If I have anything to say about it, your state, which has an incredible natural resource called the sun, your state should be one of the leaders in this country and, in fact, the world in producing solar energy.
But after Tuesday's primary, Sanders continued to trail Hillary Clinton. And the Clinton campaign hitting Arizona hard with former President Bill Clinton stumping in Tucson.
We are in position for the first time since I left office to restore an era of broadly shared prosperity and to create the most inclusive society we've ever had.
In Phoenix Monday, former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords showing her full-fledged support.
Hillary is tough. Hillary is courageous. she will fight to make our families safer. In the White House, she will stand up to the gun lobby. That's why I'm voting for Hillary.
Throngs of supporters turned out in Phoenix to see a woman who has served as a senator, first lady, and secretary of state. Hillary Clinton captured 58% of Arizona voters.
I think it's very important. It's very important that you have somebody in that White House who understands both the challenges and the opportunities we face in America today.
And on the Republican ticket, the clear winner in Arizona's presidential primary, Donald Trump, with nearly 250,000 votes. The businessman known for not mincing his words.
We are going to start winning again. We are going to win with our military, and we're going to kick ISIS. We are going to kick ISIS where it hurts. We are going to win with our military. We are going to win with our vets. We're going to take care of our vets. We're going to win with health care. We are going to have great health care for a much smaller number. We are going to reduce your taxes substantially. Look at my tax plan. We're reducing your taxes.
Protests followed the Republican frontrunner in Phoenix and in Tucson, prompting fights and arrests.
All right, get him out of here. Get him out of here. Get him. Get him out of here.
By his side, Arizona's former governor, Jan Brewer, current state treasurer, Jeff DeWitt, and Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio talking immigration.
Wait till we secure the border, then they'll look into it. Well, you ought to enforce the illegal immigration laws in Mexico, on that side, if Mexico is listening, at the border and in the interior of the United States. If they are here illegally, they should be deported.
Demonstrations for and against the billionaire. Arizona, a winner-take-all Tuesday with 58 delegates.
If I win, I will remember the people of Tucson. I will remember the people of Arizona. I will remember the people of Arizona.
And joining me now are Barrett Marson, a political strategist on the Republican side, and Jason Barraza on the Democratic side. Thank you both for your analysis today. Jason, we'll start with you. Big surprises from Tuesday.
No big surprises in the winners that came out of the race, but I think the big surprise, at least in Maricopa County, was the amount of time that some voters had to spend at the polling locations being able to actually pass their ballot and get that out of their hands. We weren't expecting to see lines that were upward 5 or 6 hours. Some were reporting being in line still at midnight. That was one of the bigger surprises to come out of Tuesday.
Barrett, how did that happen?
You know, the Maricopa County Recorder's Office, which runs the elections here, all recorders in every county run the elections, they decided to drop the number of ballot places from 200 about to 60. And instead of having you vote in your own little precinct, you could go to any of these 60 locations. Well, that was too few. And Maricopa County Recorder Helen Purcell has admitted that just wasn't enough. So, you know, she's admitted that was a mistake. There clearly were long lines, a lot of frustrations, and they're working to fix that before the May election.
Jason, does that discourage people coming up for the next election? Are people thinking there's just something not right and maybe my voice will not be heard?
I think that people get discouraged when they're standing in line trying to pass their vote, trying to cast their ballot, and they're getting results on their phones that's declaring a winner already in the election. I think that can be discouraging for individuals and create some consternation with them. But I think that what was coming out of this is promoting the permanent early voting list and trying to get more and more people on that. I think that being able to vote from your home, if you do have the ballot, you get your ballot in the mail, you can bring it to a polling location if you still like to actually show up on the polls and feel that participate in your civic action that way. There are many benefits to being on that permanent early voting list, and I think we'll see more people trying to go there after this election.
And there were in Maricopa County, about 900,000 early ballots mailed out. And so you saw a lot of people on there, and most who returned the ballot utilized that. Some, about 11,000 here in Maricopa County alone, actually went to the polls anyway, even though they had an early ballot sitting somewhere at home. But yet they still decided to come to the polls. And many of them had to stand in that long line when they really didn't need to.
But as far as being discouraging, I mean, let's face it, we have the stories of people waiting 5 hours because they were dedicated. I mean, they weren't discouraged. Some people couldn't do it. Some people had appointments, or they had to go home and take care of their kids. But some people were able to stay there. They weren't discouraged. They wanted to see this through, and they were committed and were able to do that.
Yeah, and certainly one thing to Jason's point, while some people, we have heard some people decided to give up and leave, the idea that the numbers could have changed at all in any significant way probably doesn't, that would not have happened. The early polling that we saw pretty much mirrors the actual results. Trump was always up by a big number. Hillary was always up by a big number. So really, we saw the results come in the way we expected them, even if some people decided that they were just too frustrated or didn't have enough time and had to go to a job, cook dinner, see the kids, whatever.
So no big surprises. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton were expected, as you just said. How that saturation that took place this week and all the candidates just descending on Arizona, did that really play a factor?
I don't believe it did at all. Hillary came and she entertained people at Carl Hayden High School in South Phoenix, and she won, pretty handily. Bernie came in; he had big crowds up in Flagstaff area, down here in Phoenix. His wife came in, Bill Clinton came in, but yet we didn't see any sort of surprise. We didn't see him get any bump, close the gap in any meaningful way. Frankly, the same with Trump and Cruz. Cruz came out here, he went to the border, he had rallies here with some other local leaders, and Trump came in, he had a couple of big rallies, but Cruz didn't close the gap at all.
I don't think that any of their visits impacted or swayed voters in any way and changed their minds. But what it may have impacted was highlight that there was an election coming and maybe added to some of the turnout and people showing up on election day. That may have brought more of a focus for people and made it more of a reality so that they actually showed up on Tuesday. But as far as changing voters' minds, I think that many people were already set here in Arizona.
Arizona's long been a Republican stronghold. Will that change anytime in the near future?
The last Democrat to win here for for a presidential election was Bill Clinton. So, we see another Clinton out there. Arizonans have been accepting of the Clintons before, so we might see that again.
Jason makes a good point. Arizonans have voted for Hillary Clinton before. It was over a generation ago, but they have voted for Bill Clinton. And, in a Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton field, how much, I don't think we can quantify yet, how many people will not vote for Donald Trump? How many people will I really dislike Donald Trump, but I really dislike Hillary Clinton more? We don't know that dynamic yet. We probably won't know for a couple months, and I'll be interested to see the polling, but there is a possibility where Republicans will have a suppressed vote in the general election.
Well, I think one of the dangers that we'll see is how the messaging from the races shape up. Typically, voters aren't going to show up to vote against somebody. I mean, I think a lot of Democrats are putting, we're going to see a bump in our turnout because they're not going to like a Donald Trump candidacy and they're going to show up to vote against Donald. In my experience, that typically doesn't happen. Voters show up to vote for something. So it'll be dependent on the Clinton campaign, if she is the nominee that comes out, that what kind of messaging can she develop, what kind of positive message can she bring forward that's going to draw voters out to vote for her.
And it's still over 7 months until we go to the ballot, until we get a ballot, we go to the polls. That's an eternity in politics. So many things could happen. So many outside influences could happen. We saw a terrorist attack in Brussels, obviously, and that has impacted the race. So who knows what will happen in the coming months.
And given that 6 months ago we might not have been, some people have not taken Donald Trump as seriously as he's to be taken nowadays. Where does he play into things? I mean, some people didn't think he was a viable candidate, and here he is, well on his way to being the party's nominee.
And 7 months ago, if you looked, everyone was like, well, we're not going to, he's a showman, he's a reality TV star, he's never going to.
It's a blip on the radar, he's going to go away. Yeah.
He's just, bombastic kind of guy, and he's going to go away. And now he is, for all intents and purposes, the nominee. So, people are starting to take him seriously. And he has to now pivot to, again, sort of appeal to the Republican base and the Republican primary voter, to now independents and even right-leaning Democrats. He's got to be able to motivate maybe people in Michigan and Ohio to come out for him. He didn't win Ohio, he did win Michigan. He's going to have to now take his 30 to 40 and sometimes 50% of Republicans and now grow that to capture all Republicans plus some independents.
Jason, what does the Democratic Party do to stand up against Donald Trump, Ted Cruz?
I think you got to highlight some of the things that he has said, some of the things that he probably will say. One of his biggest dangers is that he shoots from the hip. When Donald is speaking without off script, when he is kind of going, making it up as he goes, he can become a very dangerous individual. And I don't think he realizes the amount of attention that's being paid and how that's going to be used against him. Because in his business world, you just kind of make it up as you go. As long as you're selling it, and as long as people are buying it, it's fine. But when you have to start going back and looking at your record and what you've said and what you've done, that's going to be a very dangerous thing.
And two things. First of all, people are buying what he's selling. They love that off the cuffness. I'll say that one of probably the most effective commercials we will see, we've already seen a little bit, I think it was a Super PAC, not the Hillary ad, of women reading Donald Trump quotes. I think you're going to see that a lot of targeting of women. And we saw, recently he tweeted a picture or retweeted a picture of his wife and Ted Cruz's wife that some have taken as derogatory. So that is, women are a very important vote. Getting those suburban housewives in the Ohio and Michigan area, Wisconsin, those are a very important electorate. So he's going to have to soften his tone toward women so that he can attract them.
The election were today, who would it be, Barrett?
Oh, it would in Arizona or nationally?
Let's start with Arizona.
You know what? It would be a toss-up for sure. I think that Hillary actually would have a chance of turning Arizona blue, again, because of some of the rhetoric. We haven't seen Donald Trump pivot to the national general election race yet. So I would say it would be close, but I might actually give it to Hillary.
Jason?
I think it would be Hillary right now. I think there's too many unknowns. There's too many questions about Donald. I think there's a lot of discomfort with him being the nominee amongst Republicans. And I think that there's going to be a lot of individuals on the Republican side that are either not going to bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump on the ballot and will just stay out of the race, or some of them may even switch to Hillary.
7 months to go, you said it's an eternity. Wouldn't you agree, though, that everybody's watching this race now? I mean, this has awakened interest from all spectrums of this.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we live in an era where even though the information is available, people are busy with their lives. People, would rather watch a cat video on YouTube than a 3-minute speech from Hillary Clinton.
Well, it's about entertainment. I mean, that's
Right.
one of the reasons why Donald's here, because he has the entertainment value. People want to turn on the TV and see what he's going to say. The way that he speaks and the things that he talks about makes him the perfect reality TV star. That's why he's been so successful. That's why he's been a great businessman, because people like to talk to him. They like to hear what he says. But when we're talking about the leader of the free world, a person who the things you say can impact financial markets, the things you say can start wars, he might not be the person that we want in that chair.
I will say come September, October, when they do their 2 or 3 debates, those will be the most watched political events of all time. Those will be must-see TV theatrics.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank
you,
you.
Lorraine.
Tuesday's primary produced problems, including too few polling places in Maricopa County, resulting in long lines. And while people were still in line to vote, results were being announced, including that Trump and Clinton had won. That's led Attorney General Mark Brnovich to call for banning release of results until polls close. Some voters also found they weren't eligible in the election because it was open to registered Democrats and Republicans and Green Party members. That means Arizona independents had to choose a party to vote this week. And those independents actually make up the largest majority of voters in the state. The Morrison Institute for Public Policy in Phoenix recently surveyed independents. Here's Joseph Garcia on what the research showed.
The independents are in Arizona. There's people on the far right, people on the far left, and they vote accordingly, like you would think, pretty much along party lines. But that core middle of independents are mostly moderate. But if you were to break it down further, and again, they're very different because they are independent, but if you were to break it down further, You could say that they are more fiscally conservative, but more socially liberal, which makes kind of an interesting animal. And so they go case by case, looking at what the issues are and including the candidates as well. Well, when it comes to immigration, largely the independents voters are very much in favor of a pathway to citizenship and comprehensive immigration reform. So there is a group there for harvesting. I mean, when you talk about race, political races, of harvesting that vote on issues. So the issue of immigration, if it is a major issue, independents are going to have a large say in that one issue.
Independents in Arizona are not a party, a mindset. That's what somebody said in this,
Sure.
in this research. What does that tell you?
Well, I think it tells you that there's a mistake in thinking that independents are just people that were either too lazy to register as a Democrat or a Republican, or that they're really just a Democrat or Republican, kind of wearing the invisible cloak of independent. I mean, that isn't true. Independents are very strongly independent. They do not like the partisanship. They do not like being beholden to one platform or another. They do like case-by-case issues. They do like choosing different candidates from different parties. And more importantly, they like to have a voice that goes even beyond voting. These are very engaged people, and they have a voice. Now, it hasn't come to fruition where independents vote to have the impact that they could, but certainly it could happen more and more. And I think we saw that in this latest, primary, presidential preference primary, with so many independents going to the polls thinking they could vote in a primary, and they could not because it's a closed primary. It's run by the parties, even though the state pays for it. And people felt very disenfranchised on two levels. One is that independents, they could not vote, which they weren't happy about. They could do a provincial ballot, but it's not going to count. It's a placebo ballot. And two, why are we paying, this is what they're saying, why are we paying for an election we can't participate in? That isn't fair either. So, it was interesting to hear the governor, Arizona's top Republican official, saying, you know what, this isn't fair. Independents, if they want to vote, they should have a right to vote, whether it be for president or any election. So there seems to be a shift even by leaders of the two major parties understanding that there's going to have to be room for an independent voice, independent mindset, and that's going to be where they're going to look for, because there are only going to be so many Republicans and there's only going to be so many Democrats, and more the independents are the ones going to be deciding the election.
Who are the independents in Arizona? How would you describe them?
How would I describe them? Well, they're all over the place. The main thing I would say is that you look at the independents is that they have a different way of looking at the political system. They're tired of the two-party system. They do want to look at things on an individual basis. They want to study the issues more. They want to participate but not belong to a party, because when you belong to a party, people have been doing it for years. When you go to the polls, they vote. If they're Republican, just go all R's. Democrat is all D's. And there's not much crossover, and there's not much compromise or consensus between the two. There's the gap. There's the polarization, and nothing is. You got the gridlock, and not much is getting done. Independents are thinking that there can be more progress from governance. Government can actually play a role in solving problems as opposed to everything just stopping because of partisan politics. But there is no one composite of what an independent looks like. Independent looks like me, looks like you, looks like everyone you can see. They're walking among us, and we don't see them. An analogy I like to use about independence is, Democrats and Republicans are kind of like Coke and Pepsi, and people are very strongly whether they like Coke or whether they like Pepsi. And I would say that independents are Diet Dr. Pepper. Different altogether, proud to be different, and is never going to go for Pepsi, and is never going to go for Coke. They like being Diet Dr. Pepper.
And
I don't know if that's product placement or not. I don't know. I should have one.
Nice try. Independents, the largest party in the state, technically?
That's right. Largest party, but not organized. And that's important too. But that's changing as well. More and more, there are people that independents are getting together, and they may disagree on certain issues, but they're working things out to kind of see what can be done. And they're looking to have a stronger voice And I think you're going to be seeing more and more change where independent candidates is what's coming up next. We talk about candidates that are going to be running. Certain candidates, if say a Republican, a moderate Republican, cannot get out of the Republican primary because conservative Republicans only vote in the primary. Primaries, very few people vote anyway. So what's going to happen is more and more candidates are going to run as an independent, figuring, well, I can get a Republican in the general, Republican support, I can get Democratic support, and I can get independent support. But right now, the thresholds are harder. You have to collect more petition signatures and so forth in order to run as an independent candidate. So there's all these many obstacles blocking independent participation. And I think, that's going to be changing just because people are understanding, from both parties, they're going to need independent votes to survive as a party. Because more and more people every year, it's a greater number, are going independent.
Independence will change the face of Arizona politics?
Well, independence and changing demographics, both of those combined, we're looking at a very different state by 2030, perhaps sooner if there's greater participation levels than there are now. And it does seem like the voters are becoming more and more engaged, and the younger population becoming more engaged. I'll point out an interesting phenomenon that's kind of going on is that I mentioned that many Latinos adults voting age cannot vote because they're not U.S. citizens. And this includes dreamers, young Latinos who were brought here usually from Mexico at a very young age, that this is the only country they know. But still, they're not a U.S. citizen, so they cannot vote. But that doesn't mean they don't participate in the election process. They're very much involved, going to door, making sure older Latinos vote, eligible, pointing out how important this election is. They are participating in the election process without actually casting a ballot. So, and I think the immigration issue is galvanizing the Latino community, very much so that it is going to be affected even by people who cannot vote. So while dreamers are not U.S. citizens, not yet anyway, right now, they're participating in the American democracy process. So it's kind of an interesting thing that goes on. I mean, democracy, I think, is larger than just casting a ballot. Although we saw from the long lines up here in Maricopa County that the practice of casting a ballot is something pretty sacred to most Americans.
For a link to that report from the Morrison Institute, log on to our website, azpm.org. And next week, we'll take a look at the impact of Latino voters in Arizona. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us.